Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, we're going to talk about my Christmas with Claudia. I believe that this is definitely the first Christmas that I've spent seeing her family. I went out of town to spend some time with her. It's been a busy Christmas week. A lot going on. Probably behind on quite a few projects. It's not entirely the fault of Christmas. Part of it is that I've been using Christmas as an excuse to just relax and enjoy myself. But yeah. Anyway, though, before I talk about Christmas with Claudia, I figured I'd do kind of a look back on the year. There have been some ups and downs. We've had Patreon kind of blew up temporarily there. They're back to their old system, but they were talking about still wanting to implement changes. So that's something to think about in the future. Patreon may not be entirely stable. I've waited a long time without commenting on it to see if they turned around, like a week or two later and tried something else. I guess they're probably going to let things blow over for a little bit before they make another move. Still not really sure on what exactly they were thinking, because if you go by their official explanation, it doesn't make a lot of sense. They just did a lot of harm for no real, tangible good. Tons of people left. We had a good number of people leave our Patreon. We got some of those numbers back, but it was kind of a dive. It was kind of tough. As far as YouTube is going, the quality of viewership and things like that, we're still on a downward trend, unfortunately. And I got a chance to talk to some people who have involvement and who work at YouTube. I didn't know this, but if you go onto Reddits and things like that, those people actually they exist and they talk to people. And twice now, I've gotten to talk to people who are associated with YouTube. And my impression, the thing that I take away from those discussions, that they were very polite, and they were I understand your pain, and we hear about these worries, and we're thinking about them, and so on and so forth. But my ultimate impression that I got, based on all the explanation that both of these guys really give, is that they think that YouTube is not having a problem. They recognize that there are problems on YouTube, but they take their promotional algorithm, and it sounds like they believe that it isn't really doing anything wrong. The thing that I kept seeing in both of these occasions was the person saying the algorithm wouldn't be showing people this type of video if people didn't want to see it, So it's sort of like they blame people for making the algorithm what it is. And so when they look at the Anna Elsa Frozen thing, they refuse to comment on that. I was like, so how do you explain Anna Elsa Frozen? Because that was clearly just exploiting the algorithm. And it was a really good example of sort of a race to the bottom that YouTube is creating by always promoting the fastest, cheapest kind of content. And he was just like, well, I don't want to comment on that because it's a big controversial thing. And, I don't think that he had backup. It's just kind of this is my personal opinion, and if I start commenting on Anna Elsa, then it can become a press fiasco, because that's a thing in the press right now. So yes, my suspicion is that things are going to continue as they are on YouTube. The trends that we're seeing, that a lot of artists are really frustrated with, are probably going to keep on going. And, there's so much evidence that this perspective that the algorithm isn't hurting the site is wrong. Think about tutorials these days. If you try to look up a tutorial on how to do something, very frequently you'll get videos that are a half hour long, and they're not focused. It's not easy to tell where the information you want is. Recently I started playing Stellaris, and I was trying to look up what are some basic guidelines for playing Stellaris. And so I was reading the forums, and there's a whole bunch of different opinions on some of the more complex aspects of the game. They get into research, and there's a lot of math. So I looked at a video, YouTube's top video for whatever my search input was. And, it was Stellaris tutorial, top 10 tips, And what it was just a 30-minute Let's Play. And none of it was subdivided into tips. It wasn't here's what you want to do to get these results. It was just continuous, unedited footage with a guy talking over the game as he played. And I guess somewhere throughout this, he gave 10 tips, but I actually couldn't figure out where he organized his recommendations into. And during the Let's Play, he proved that he was actually kind of a mediocre player. He wasn't really very good. He wasn't a top expert at the game or anything like that. He was losing. I don't know. It's just sort of how did this become the top recommended tutorial? Surely this was not what the majority of people wanted when they looked up how to do better research in Stellaris or whatever. You know, like I would have liked a concise 5-minute video, but the algorithm won't give you that kind of thing. And I have like a theory on why really bad tutorials are more popular. It's that if you have a tutorial, like even if it's long, like if you make a 15-minute tutorial, but you divide it up so it's nice and clear, it's like here's the timestamps to go to if you want this information, then people will go to the section that they want to find the information they want. They watch the video for like a minute, get that data, then leave. So you have these very low watch times, very low retention times. So a good tutorial looks to YouTube like a bad video because not enough people are watching it, even though the tutorial being fast and efficient is actually serving its most intended purpose. So, so crappy tutorials are the only ones that can survive on YouTube. And so often, I feel like this is just the nature of YouTube. Like, crappy video better serves YouTube's system than almost anything else. And they're just going to continue down this road. And I expect that there's going to be more advertiser blowouts. You guys are going to see more controversies and things like that. And I'll get up here and I'll talk about them, I guess, when they come up. But yeah, it doesn't sound like YouTube understands how to build a media website. Like, it sounds like they're just focused around, like they're stuck. They want to build their AI and they want to do this. They want to be an ad platform, but they don't really want to fiddle with the nuance of like, what do people actually really want to see, in their heads, if people are watching video, then they want to see the video, and they don't really care any further. It doesn't seem like they're thinking about it any further than that. So, yeah, unless there's someone at the top who's got a different perspective than these two guys I spoke to or had written exchanges with, I feel like 2018, we're going to continue to see trouble. And, that means I don't really know for sure what's going to happen with us. I've been thinking about just the video that we do. Everything's just kind of going down in views, and I see the kind of stuff that gets promoted, and I just don't want to do it. Like, I just don't want to go into that sort of like pandering kind of thing. It's not why I got into video in the first place. I want to make things that are at least somewhat rewarding for me. I don't want to just like entertain kids with jangly keys for 30 minutes every day and say if I was going to entertain kids, for goodness sake, I'd make a cartoon or something that I thought like a story, something maybe with a didactic, we teach the kids something. I'd try to be a positive influence, and my channel would still fail because the guy doing the Let's Plays of a children's game is posting longer content. I don't know. So this is kind of what we can expect from YouTube coming up. Don't know what to expect from Patreon. We've had the tax bill. As far as my general life goes, though, I've been looking at taxes and talking about taxes with Claudia, and I took this as rather exciting. Like, I became resigned when I started to get into art. I became resigned to a life of poverty. I thought to myself, like, yeah, notoriously people don't always do super well financially with this sort of thing, and I'm okay with that. So I was really shocked when I sat down and I was doing the finances with Claudia, and I realized that our combined income puts me back in the middle class for the first time in so many years. I've been in poverty for pretty much most of my adult life. So I was a little bit surprised. Combined income, suddenly I'm doing all right. And not only that, I mean, this is really Claudia's fault. She's kind of the breadwinner of our family. But I was doing the math, and I was like, and I know I felt a little bad because it's sort of like, well, she's contributing more than I am, and I don't want to be the one holding us back. But then it turns out that my lower income has dragged Claudia kicking and screaming into a lower income bracket than she was in. Our joint filing is actually lower than a lower bracket than where she was at. So now she's going to save like a bunch of money, like thousands of dollars, because it's like a 10% change to taxes. So me being in poverty has saved Claudia a ton of money in taxes compared to where she was. So for us, joint filing is actually going to turn out okay. You often hear about couples when they do their joint filing, they wind up in a higher income bracket with their combined incomes. But in our case, we lucked out. Claudia's going to be paying less, which is great because I roped her into being on car insurance with me so that we could both drive each other's cars. And previously she was on a family plan, so I jumped a whole bunch of more, a whole bunch of car expenses. But that's only like another, a couple thousand. I'm saving her 10% of her income now. So, yeah, there's some excitement there, at least about me pulling her down into that lower bracket. So yeah, think about that, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a low income bracket, you can always, and you get married, you might be the person Like, don't lose hope. Your low income might actually save the person you married a good amount of money, and it'll bring you just not that much closer, but a little closer to parity with their income levels. So yes, I don't know. Everyone kind of does things with joint income nowadays. Almost everyone I knew who got married, it's kind of like joint income is the only way they can really be in the middle class. Some there are some exceptions, but I don't know. It's tough. It's tough these days. So yes, but speaking of that, then there's also the tax plan. There's the net neutrality thing. We're going to see how things pan out with the net neutrality. There is definitely going to be abuse. None of these companies, no ISP has a good reputation for treating people well. So it's hard to say what's going to happen. Right now, Congress has been talking about passing a law that will cement the decision made by the FCC to repeal net neutrality, because that's just what they're focused on, is they're trying to deregulate things. It's really frustrating to watch them do this, because you're getting a lot of monopolies and oligopolies and things like that. They're not competitive businesses. They're not like free market enterprises. They work on a different model than that sort of like widget factory thing that everyone always thinks about. And it's just really frustrating to watch like Congress deregulate them and pass laws that are like, like supply and demand, economics 101. And like I took an econ 101 class, and econ 101, the class will teach you the difference between a monopoly and like a widget factory. It's not that's basic economics. Basic economics is understanding that different markets work differently, and there's different ways of predicting how they'll behave. So that brings us also to the tax plan. The tax plan is interesting. I think doing the math, Claudia and I are not really going to save a lot of money, and neither will most people on this. Especially if you're in the lower income brackets. If you're not making very much money, you really won't save very much from this tax plan. It is a temporary tax cut, but it's going to be phased out over 10 years, and the Republicans are talking about, adjusting the plan before the cuts phase out. But it's super weird. They didn't remove any of the loopholes. They were talking about reform, but they didn't remove any of the loopholes. They just lowered the corporate rate, and they substantially lowered the rate for the rich. And it's just very disheartening to me. But I had a friend on Facebook. He's very right wing. Most of my left wing friends have all blocked me by now. But I have a friend, like the right wing guys will fight you tooth and nail. They don't care. They expect to fight. But all my left wing friends have pretty much blocked me, because like every time I question them, they're just like, I'm offended. Block. I'll never talk to you again. So yes. Anyway, though, he posted this thing, and he's like, AT&T recently raised wages. And also what he didn't know is that they fired a bunch of people too. But this is what I'm talking about, is like different market economies have different rules. And AT&T, them being an ISP and also like a telecom or whatever, they are not, they don't have the same rules. There's elastic and inelastic goods, and I always get confused which is elastic and which is inelastic. I always have to double check before I talk about this, but I'm pretty sure that elastic goods, highly elastic goods, are goods that if you change the price, then you get a strong reaction in terms of whether or not people will buy your good. So, like you're selling, let's say, luxury watches or something like that, and you raise the price like $100, people have a strong reaction to that, they buy fewer watches. But stuff with like food, like suppose you're selling bread or eggs or something like that, and you raise the price on bread, up like $100. Well, people need bread to live. Like if there's other alternatives to bread, they may not go buy it. It's not like there's not like an infinite lack of elasticity here, but essentially like you move the price up and the buyers follow. You may lose a couple of people, but if people really need that bread, they need to eat, they need to live, they'll buy the bread. They'll pay for that bread. Like they'll make sacrifices to survive. And the same thing goes like these internet things, these monopolies, these oligopolies that are being created. A monopoly and an oligopoly, they're almost always very inelastic goods. If they raise prices, people continue to pay the price because they need them. It's stuff like water, electricity, internet service. There's usually not that much competition for internet service, and you pay kind of the same prices. no matter who you go to. Like, it's price, it's all very similar. Insurance is another really good example. Very inelastic. If I don't have these reversed, it's either elastic or it's inelastic. I'm pretty sure it's inelastic. And anyway, so it doesn't really matter if you change your prices. People are going to pay whatever needs to be paid. And the problem with these monopolies and these oligopolies is that if they really start gouging people and they become a public problem, then the politicians, their hands will be forced. So what they kind of do is they hover around being just as bad as they can be, like as bad as possible, without being so bad that someone has to specifically come in and do something about them. And that's how we've kind of gradually gotten, like, we've just reached this sort of like creeping point where there are some companies in America that are just killing the economy, and we're not doing anything about them because they've been gradually getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at this point, you're kind of looking at medicine, and like people are kind of saying like, well, how is it that we're paying 4 times as much as anywhere else in the known world? And yeah, and it's just sort of like, well, that happened gradually. Like that's been going on for decades. It's been growing and bloating for decades. You know, they've made these small steps and small steps and small steps. If they did everything all at once, if they just became immediately corrupt and you know, gouged everybody right away, then somebody would have stepped in. And so, you know, like this is just going to be how things continue. Like this tax plan, it doesn't affect those monopolies and oligopolies because of the inelasticity. So like some taxes can affect luxury goods. So like you go back to like golden watches or whatever, like a gold watch. Like if you charge a huge tax, then the business has to offset that tax burden onto the people buying golden watches, and it raises the price, and then people react to that price. They don't want to buy a more expensive gold watch, so they just don't. And so taxes will hurt luxury goods or goods that are very elastic, like goods that are very delicately affected by price point. You know, that's that curve that a lot of people, they're like, oh, it's economics 101. You know, you always see on the internet, like, it's economics 101. You know, let me just tell you, like, supply and demand, economics 101. It's a very specific class of goods. It's a very specific class of company that follows that rule. But things like ISPs, like AT&T, because they can change their prices and people will buy no matter what, the taxes don't really matter as much to them because they'll offset the tax burden onto you one way or the other, and you'll continue to pay it one way or the other. So you're not really actually going to see a lot of stimulus in these oligopolies and monopolies. Like health insurance companies are going to get a bunch of money back from this tax refund, but it's not really going to affect their business very much, or it's not likely to. And same goes for like AT&T and every other little oligopoly and monopoly that exists in America today. All these great big wealthy companies, they're just going to continue their same business model because fundamentally nothing has changed with reference to their, you know, the taxes didn't change their economy. So, and that's why analysts are saying like, you know, like they talk about growth and they're like, yeah, you know, like the stock market's going to go up for a little bit, like maybe about 2 years, and then, you know, we're probably going to slide downward a little bit because we're going to have less investment into like public infrastructure and things like that. You know, so they're kind of predicting tepid growth and then, you know, maybe kind of a downward trend. Nothing really good. Like the Republicans have been saying like, oh, it's going to set the economy on fire. And just because of the way that the U.S. economy is getting more and more concentrated into these oligopolies and things like that, probably not. Probably not. You're going to see a bunch of stock buybacks, and that may be important. My belief is that what the Republicans are trying to do is there have been some warning signs that maybe the economy is going to not going to collapse, but we're going to enter a recession. And the recovery has been going on for a long time. Like, I don't know enough about economics to explain some of this, but I was reading about they're saying like, yeah, you know, yield curves have flattened out and whatever. And so that usually if you see yield curves start to drop, then, you know, you got a recession on the way, and so on and so forth. But, you know, people vary in their opinions on what the economy is doing and how it works. They're also saying that there's a lot of global growth. You know, not entirely sure. I don't know. Again, I don't know enough to parse that information. But my theory, my suspicion is that what the Republicans are hoping will happen is that the temporary boost from the tax cuts, all the stock buybacks, will stimulate the economy for long enough that when they get to the next election cycle and the pendulum swings and the Democrats take control, then we'll have another collapse. And then they can say that the Democrats collapsed the economy, even though it was kind of going to collapse anyway, just because we've created a very volatile regulatory system. And, you know, I mean, like, it's gotten to where, like, companies fall and then we just bail them out with taxpayer money. We've got, like, investment banks and savings banks that people put their money in. They're the same thing now. I mean, they didn't used to be, but they just like deregulated all this stuff. They've made it okay to gamble with people's savings. They've done all these things, and it just creates a more volatile economy. And it's not the fault of Republicans or Democrats. It's just something that they both worked together to achieve over many years. And we're just going to continue to see these sorts of probably volatile market behaviors because the rules for the market permit very volatile behaviors. So, yes, the economy, whatever. We got a couple of years. I'm going to save maybe like, $100 in taxes, maybe. Probably less. I mean, I individually would save less, but I think that now that I'm in the middle class, maybe $100. Me bringing Claudia down into a lower tax bracket saved us more money than this tax cut will. So, that's going on. New year, tax cuts, things like that. I felt the need to talk about it because the guys that the super right-wing guys, I don't know where they get their information, but it was like they did not understand that a monopoly is a thing, is what it felt like. They were just like, no, there's one form of market, the economics 101 market. It's like, you've never taken an economics 101 class. Like, why do people, I don't know why people get on like that. It's economics 101. Like, it's basic economics. Everyone should understand this. It's like, no, economics is like a whole semester class. It's not just like you sit down and then in like a single lecture, they're like, supply, demand, done. There's a bunch of different things in an economics. Why would you have classes if it was as simple as that? So, yes. But anyway, though, as far as the future goes, like I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to bring in new people to the YouTube. I've been trying advertising and things like that. But they've switched over to this sort of like topic-based system now, where they're not really trying to promote channels. What they're trying to do is promote topics. So you look at, like, say, the J cartoons, and the J cartoons are they're just like random videos, they're about things. And it's not about the latest fad, it's not about a fidget spinner, it's not about slime, it's not about Spider-Man, it's not about Elsa from Frozen. My videos aren't about things, they're not about big things, they're just little skits, they're just little comedy skits. And YouTube's algorithm doesn't know how to find an audience for what I'm making, because it's like, oh, a J cartoon, like, what's a J cartoon? Like, I don't know, I've never seen that before, and so they don't direct anyone to it. And so I'm not really like receiving any new audiences or new growth. And we're thinking about going forward, though. We're going to wrap up J Cartoons, hopefully before the year gets out. I'm losing confidence that that's going to happen. I realize I've got a dinner with my family like tomorrow. So, holiday stuff. I got a lot of stuff. Got a lot of holiday stuff going on. But anyway, though, we're going to wrap up the J Cartoons and then we're going to get into the semi-intelligent thing. I've gotten to be a much better artist than I was when I first tried that out. I can draw people a little bit better. I can draw hands a little bit closer. Still really hard to draw hands. But I'm getting better, and so I've done some sketches for some new rigs. And my plan is to do something similar to the J Cartoons, these 1-minute sketch videos, but with the monkey characters that I've talked about in the past. And I don't think it'll do well, for the same reason the J Cartoons aren't doing well. Semi-Intelligent isn't about a top trending topic, and so YouTube's not going to know what audience should watch it, and therefore the only people who are going to see it are the subscribers that are still notified about every video that I do. So, J Cartoons pulled in maybe between 7,000 to 10,000 viewers each, and I expect Semi-Intelligent will do about the same, but just for substantially more work. And again, this is YouTube's race to the bottom. I'm sure that doing J Cartoons, continuing J Cartoons, would be a better investment of my time. But, YouTube is not, it doesn't strike me as a sustainable system. So I feel like if I don't push myself to improve, and instead I just push myself to YouTube, pretty soon I'm just going to be in this like swamp of like, wow, everything's awful. And I'll have no real skills to show for it. A lot of people who get really big on YouTube don't seem to have any real skills to show for their videos. They got big originally because they had some major skill to start with that people were interested in, and then YouTube didn't promote their skill. They just promoted like the video that they were doing, the topics they were talking about, and then eventually they kind of wind up stuck to these low effort videos. Like, it's like basically it's the Game Grumps syndrome, where like everyone was interested in Aaron originally because he was an animator, but then YouTube, so that's how he got big, and then YouTube was like, but you know what we really want to see? Lower effort, less work. Like, from now on, just film yourself playing video games and shouting, "Hee-ah, bitch!" And that will be your entire, your career. And it's like, there's no personal improvement in doing that. It's super weird. And I'm also seeing this thing where like now super big YouTubers are becoming patrons of like high skilled YouTubers. Like there's this thing, if you haven't seen this video called The Bad Apple, it's really great. It's like this story that this guy does. He does mostly vlogs, but then at one point he hires this animator to like animate one of his good stories. And the animation, it really does add a lot. It's like really good animation. It's like stop motion stuff with these little dolls. It's really cool. It's really worth a watch. But then you check out the animator who did this video, and his like channel is dead. Like nobody's there. He does these tutorials, he puts his heart and his soul into it. Like it's still really good work. Like you can tell this guy is like really good at what he does. And it's just like nothing. Nobody's watching. Nobody knows who he is. Even though he showed up in this like big YouTube video, got hundreds of thousands of views on this YouTube video, still nothing. And I was watching like Jaden animations, and Claudia and I were commenting on it. We were both talking about like Jaden animations. We are like, yeah, like her videos are kind of cute and all this. And on our way to Christmas with their family, while we were in the car, because it was a road trip, we had a couple of hours. We're just driving through the flat plains of Kansas, and the radio goes out. It's out in the country, so there's just like nothing. We're flipping around, and all we can find are like Christian radio, and like everyone's just begging for money on the Christian radio. They're like, give us your money. We're a small church. We need all the money. And yeah, so we're just like, huh. Well, so Claudia gives me her phone, because her phone is younger than mine. There's many things. Claudia lives a younger life. I resigned myself to poverty, and like I got shoes this Christmas. I've been wearing the same shoes for years. Like I'll wear things until they're destroyed, until they got holes in them. So Claudia, her parents were like, "What does Greg want?" And she's like, "I'll tell you what he needs." So I've gotten a lot of replacements for old worn out clothes with like holes in them, pants falling apart, everything. She's looking out for me. What a great addition to my life, Claudia. You guys have no idea how much she's improved my life. So anyway, though. Right, so we're watching Jaden animations, and we were both like, yeah, she's really cute. Like Claudia subscribed to her, and so what wound up happening is we put her on in the car, and like we couldn't see the visuals because it was just like the car playing her videos, and like the camera was down, and we were just sitting and we were just listening to her, and we're just like watching for a while, and I turned to her and I'm like, man, Jaden's actually not really a very good storyteller. Because she's just like, and I don't blame her. What I think it is just because YouTube wants so much content so fast. I think that she just sits down and she's like, well, what am I going to talk about today? And then she talked for a while, and then she kind of diverted into like other topics, and it was sort of like there was no thread, there was no narrative. I do the same thing with my personal times. It's like every single week I get up here and I think of something to say. And, I can rattle off a lot off the top of my head, and maybe it seems like a narrative. But definitely I don't sit down and make a script, because making a script would take me however much time. And I've got other stuff that I need to do. Jaden's got to spend a lot of time on animation. If she spends like an hour, 2, 3 hours on a script, then that's like 2 or 3 hours she's not animating. So it didn't surprise me at all, but you take away those really cute visuals that she does, and there's really not like a good, some of those, I think there's a difference, because I've seen some that are a little bit better than others, but in this particular video, we were just like, man, this is actually really boring. Without the cute cartoons, it's not very much. And she's actually a really good animator, though. I saw her recently, going back to this thing of patronage. This is really why she came up. I saw a thing that she did recently for someone else's video, another bigger YouTuber, and she was really great. Like, she's a really good animator. She's got her fundamentals nailed down really well. Her art style's cute. Like, clearly she's got a lot of skill. And my impression I took away from all that was just that she was wasting her talent on YouTube. Like, whatever her abilities are, I feel like if you put her on a script, or possibly if you let her write her own script, where you were like, all right, Jaden, come up with like a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and have some rising action and then a resolution, I feel like she could do it. If you just gave her the time and the breathing room to be a phenomenal artist, she could be so much better than YouTube has allowed her to be. But there's this horrible ceiling that's just like pressing down on her. My impression is that she's so much more skilled than people really see from YouTube. And I think that's got to be true of just everyone who's doing well and has talent on this platform. So yeah, anyway, though, so YouTube. So I said I talk about Christmas. Instead I talked a lot about politics and depressing things. But anyway, though, so Christmas. Let's talk about Christmas. Let's end on a high note. So anyway, though, I went down to see Claudia's family downtown. They actually Claudia grew up in a smaller part of town. And her family's Mexican, so they came over, and she says that times were a little bit tougher when they first arrived here, as you might imagine. Claudia kind of grew up, and it's not a very big town. It was funny because she was like showing me all the little towns. She was like, "Yeah, I grew up down here. Like, this is a really bad part of town. There's like shootings and people are dying and children in the streets, stray dogs. This is where I grew up." And then she drives over like 2 blocks, and she's like, "And this is the really nice part of town. Like, everyone over here is super rich. And, like, the houses were enormous. Like, I just could not believe it was like it was like the oblongs." Or whatever, where you have this house up on the hill and it's like super fantastic and rich, and then down below it's like, they're just pouring like sewage directly into everyone's drinking water. And it was just like, how, like, it's such a small town, like, how do you get this huge, like, here's the rich and then here's like the ultra poor? There's like gang violence and shootings and robberies. Like, Claudia was like, yeah, one of my friends had her house broken into like 3 times. Robberies, just people would just break in, steal stuff, sell it for drugs, whatever. She showed me a little downtown area. She's like, here's where all the young people hang out, but don't hang out here past like 1 o'clock when all the bars start to let out. It gets rowdy. There was a shooting here recently. And, it's just sort of like, and then she went over to her part of town, and her parents had moved over into a more safer area of town. And, it was just kind of like interesting. But yes, her family, they do Christmas. When they do Christmas, they do Christmas really big. Like, my family, we're pretty low key about Christmas. Like, I remember there being a fair amount of stuff when I was a kid. You'd get your one present from each family member, and then Santa would give you like a bike. And the bike was like the big ticket item. Santa always got like a big ticket item, and that was because you can't ask your parents for expensive stuff all the time. You can't be like, I want a new bike. You have to wait till Santa brings it. Santa has endless pockets. He can bring you whatever you want within reason, so long as you ask for it. But, your parents can't buy you a bike around the year. So we would get that big ticket item, like a bicycle or whatever. I would get a bike, my sister would get a bike. And there was this big expensive thing that came from Santa. And that was kind of how we did things. And as we got older, everyone kind of knew less and less what to get each other. Like my parents, as a kid, when my parents would go shopping, my mom would just choose something for my dad and vice versa. And, I would buy it, they would buy it for me and then put my name on it and say like, oh, from Greg, here's this thing that you wanted from Greg. And it was always like really pragmatic gifts, things that you knew that the other person would want, and so on and so forth. And as I've gotten older, my parents are just kind of like, what would you like? And I'm like, I don't know. And so they would just like write me a check for like some money, and then that would be it. Like, I would just be like, here's your gift, and it would just be like a little box, a check inside. And so then I would just put that money in the bank and then spend it eventually, because you always need money. That's always super valuable, and consequently, I tend to just wear holes in everything. I save money, like Christmas is not a strong monthly cash flow. So, like theoretically, I guess I should spend that money on stuff, but instead I just sit on it and let all my stuff get holes torn in them. But Claudia's family, what they seem to do is they don't just do like one gift per person. They do like multiple gifts per person sometimes. Like Claudia bought gifts from herself, and then she bought gifts from Maya, our dog. She's like, oh yeah, Maya bought you a gift. And so there was like 2 gifts coming from Claudia. People were buying gifts that were like to Greg and Claudia. We had like 2 gifts that were to Greg and Claudia. I got tons of different things from her parents. Like just boyfriends showed up. Her sister's boyfriend showed up, and he bought me a gift. Like, I was not prepared. I'd bought gifts for Claudia. I wasn't sure what to get for everyone else, because I'd gotten into that mindset of like, you just call your parents and you ask them what they want, and they're like, oh, I need a new fork. And so you just go down, you just buy a fork, you know, it's simple. But like her family wasn't like, I don't know, I didn't quite have that relationship with her family. And so I didn't just know like what kind of, like, do you need a fork? Do you need a toaster? Like, what do you need? I don't know for sure. And so I didn't really buy anything, and I thought it would be cool because sometimes when I go to Christmas with my family, you know, you never know who's going to buy someone presents. Like, sometimes my sister and I get each other gifts, but it's kind of on the basis of whether or not we can think of what to get each other. Like, sometimes she shows up with something, sometimes she doesn't, sometimes I show up with stuff, sometimes she doesn't. This year I got her something. But you know, you never know. You never know. You don't anticipate a gift. You just think, like, maybe we'll get one. So... yeah, I kind of went into it thinking that same thing, and then it was just like mountains and mountains of gifts. And what they do, they have Christmas Eve is the big deal, and then Christmas Day, everybody just kind of like lays around and does whatever. It's the nice, relaxing day where no one has any obligations. But Christmas Eve was like this great big dinner. They cooked up like pork ribs and sliders and wings and like all kinds of treats and confections, just like big dinner thing. And my family does a dinner too, but this was like big buffet dinner just with all kinds of stuff. The ribs were really good. I was really pleased about that. And then what they do is they open presents at midnight because, you know, midnight is technically Christmas Day. So we all sat around and like I was starting to get really tired. Like it goes on for a while because there's so many gifts and everyone goes around and they're like, this is from so and so, this is from this person. You know, I opened this up, and It just went on for a long time, and I was like tired, and the dogs were fighting because there's two dogs. There's Luna and Maya. And you know, Luna's like this pudgy little animal. She's actually not very well trained. And Maya is our dog, and Maya she kind of doesn't like other dogs. She doesn't get along. So Luna would want to play with like whatever toys Maya was getting, because Maya had to open gifts as well. And so she got like this new bunny, and then like Luna would want to pick the bunny up, and it would just be like this fight. You know, they would snarl at each other, and so we have to like separate them. And then the dogs are running around. Maya's trying to tear up things that we shouldn't tear up because there's so much excitement. She gets a little over enthused. Yeah. But yes. At the end of the day, I went home with some new socks, like new shirts, stuff I actually kind of needed, but just never go out and get because clothes cost money and things like that. And then I felt really guilty because I didn't really get anyone anything. And like her parents bought us a TV, and Claudia and I were just both like, oh my god. Like, I don't know how she feels about it, but I was just kind of like, oh gosh. Like, I don't really do well with like compliments and gifts and things like that. I do better with like harsh criticism. You know, people putting me down. I take that more. I take that better. I tolerate it better than I tolerate gifts. You know, for a long time it was really awkward to sort of be doing the Patreon thing and to be doing this and that, because it's like asking for money, you know, asking for people to support you, and like asking for support always feels awkward to me. I'd rather that people be tearing me down to a certain extent, not in a dumb way, people who are just like, your work is awful, or, you know, kill yourself, whatever. That's not very useful. But people who are like tear me down in a constructive way is okay. Some people don't know what it means to be constructive, so I'm not trying to encourage. If you're one of those people who are just like, yeah, I don't know, everyone's too thin-skinned, like I always tell them they're ass, and then they always respond, they're good all sensitive, and they're always like, I'm not ass. I'm not trying to encourage you guys. I mean, it's okay if you think I'm ass, but, you know, honestly, I can't do anything with that. Like, be less ass. It's like, it's not that constructive. Like, okay, you know, you can tell me what you dislike about it. Maybe I can work with that. Maybe not. It depends on what you dislike. But, you know, all I can do is just try to be less ass. I'm always striving for that. I hope you realize. So, yes. Yeah, gifts, I don't know. And then before I went out the door, this was kind of a funny thing, was that they had like someone had given them a meat and cheese box. And it turns out it's actually pretty good, but I never know what to do with those things. They're not really into meats and cheeses. And so Claudia was like, Greg really likes food. And so they're just like, oh, thank goodness. And so they also just gave me the meat and cheese box on the way out. And I hate to say it, but I mean, of all the things I got, like the TV, you know, I felt guilty about, but the meat and cheese, I mean, I kind of like meat and cheese. I'm okay with this gift. I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know. It's got like mustard in it, Dijon mustard, stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. lots of gifts is not actually the way to please me. I mean, I know that my Christmas may sound bleak, where I just go and I get like a single check for a certain amount of money, but I'm not really a very I'm not like, oh, I really wanted this thing. I'm not that materialistic. I tend to be pretty happy. Claudia is sort of funny. It's like I came in and I moved in, and technically nothing changed as far as her living situation, except that I turned the guest room into an office. Like, that's all that really happened. Is I was just like, yep, here's my computer, done. Like, I'm moved in, I'm set. You know, that's all I really needed. Just my little space to do my work, and I'm pretty good. So, yeah, you know, I never know what to do with Christmas. I don't think very much about things and getting things, or you know, and I feel awkward receiving gifts, so I never know what to do to get people things, because I know that there's things that they might need or they might want, and I always feel like getting them something they need is kind of the best way to go, but sometimes I don't know what people need. And, yes. So anyway, though, it's not quite the new year yet, but we're on our way there. You know, a lot going on, a lot of changes. I got to think of a way to maybe make some income aside from Patreon, because while Patreon is still going to work, I assume at least until the end of the year, I don't know how much longer it's going to hold out. I don't really have faith in it to not screw things up again, because if they made that move that was so huge and so destructive, it doesn't really imply that they're going to be super trustworthy going forward. It sounds like YouTube really likes where they're at right now, and they want to keep going in a downward trend. Like, they're saying like, oh, you know, we've got so much viewership or whatever, and I'm convinced that at some point they're going to reach the upper limits of that viewership. Like, you can't just say like, here's this long repetitive video, you know, forever, and just expect viewership is always going to incline. The worth of ads is continuing to drop off. Advertisers are getting fed up with this system. Like, they're tired of getting paired up with, like, you know, disgusting, you know, low quality video, bad video, like things that you wouldn't actually want people to see. They're sick of being paired up with this stuff. There's really no value in being seen next to low quality video. Like, yeah, they want to be seen by a certain number of eyes, but like, you know, the objective is really to get people to buy your stuff or to click on your ads or whatever. And, you know, just exploiting quantity isn't really a very long-term plan. Like I say, sooner or later, you're not going to be able to get more viewers, and the worth of ads will continue to go down, and then people will just make less money. You know, it's not a good long-term plan. It's not like a 10-year plan that they're going through right now, but this seems to be the path that they're committed to. It's what they really want to do. So yes, so I don't know what's going to happen going forward. I don't know if we're going to survive on to 2019. I do hope that we will. I feel like the majority of viewership loss is on the Rainbow Dash Presents videos. I noticed that more of the time our new videos are starting to get watched more than the old videos. I mean, like, Rainbow Dash Presents used to be the bulk of our viewership, but we took a pretty substantial dive during the algorithm change. There was like an algorithm change that wiped out a bunch of views for a bunch of channels, and it looks like they made another adjustment, but whatever they did, although it brought back some people, it didn't bring me back. So, you know, I don't know for sure what to do with it. Like I say, I know what kind of video does well on YouTube. I know how to set it up. I would need a certain amount of seed viewership to make it run, but whatever it was, like, it would be that same kind of like schlocky derivative stuff that you guys have all seen before. And I know that none of you really want to see me do that so much. I mean, like, one of the things that I always hear about what they like about my Let's Plays is that it's sort of the Let's Plays themselves are like a show with characters, you know? It's not just me being like, hey, this is me doing this thing, doing a typical Let's Play. In fact, when I did that, the viewership was abysmal. It was probably one of the worst viewed Let's Plays I'd ever done. It was the Fallout 4 thing, where I was just like, hey, this is Greg, and I'm playing this game. You know, nobody really watched it. And it was like the lowest amount of effort, and I feel like I probably could have done, you know, multiple episodes of that in a day and maybe pulled up more viewership, but ultimately not really that great. I mean, clearly what people want to see is quality, and so if you just kind of like pluck from my own subscribers and you say like, oh, like, if you just notify it a random sample, you're more likely to get better responses if people know that what they're watching has a lot of effort put in. But weirdly, although the people that I already have will watch high effort material, it doesn't feel like that's the way that you grow on YouTube. Like I say, I've seen what works, and we know some things that will work. It's really clear what kind of stuff gets really big, but it's also very competitive to break into those very crappy markets because everyone can do that kind of content. It's not very challenging content. My favorite thing is there's this video on YouTube. It's just a man slapping himself in the face on loop for 24 hours. And like I say, he doesn't even slap himself for the full 24 hours. It's a loop, but that's got 10 million views on it. And that's the ultimate state of YouTube. That's the absolute state of YouTube right now. Think of how many high quality videos that you've seen this year. Think about everything that was really amazing. And how many of those things have 10 million views? How do you compete with Man Slaps Face? I feel like we're in Idiocracy, where the top winning film is this man's anus. It's just an hour and a half of a man's butt. And that's what YouTube is promoting. So, YouTube is gradually creating Idiocracy. There's nothing we can do. We can't stop them. They're too powerful. But we'll see, I don't know. We'll see. Whatever has to happen will happen. And I'll continue to just try to improve and hope that maybe, because one of the few ways that channels still get big is if you do something that gains notice off of YouTube. And it feels like the ability to do that is shrinking as well because you're getting fewer communities. And of course, when you make original content, I can't take Semi-Intelligent to a forum for Fallout or whatever. But if people talk about it, then maybe it'll get big and then YouTube will understand it's a topic. But that's kind of like wishing on a star, whatever. So I don't know what'll happen. I don't really have any surefire way to make animated content work. And following everyone who tried to make animated content work, it seems like nobody knows how to make it work right now. It's kind of a mystery. So unless you're really lucky, it's just sort of like YouTube will kill this sort of content. I don't know. I'm going to keep trying. Going to keep at it. I know that's what you guys are in it for. That and the other stuff that I do. We're going to finish that Let's Play. It's got a bunch of cutscenes, the episode I started working on right now, and then, Christmas stuff came up, and I'm doing the big finale J cartoon, which is going to be 5 minutes long. It won't take as long to animate as Nash. We're already, a reasonable amount through that. It's got a bunch of little frills on it, though, so, yeah. But anyway, though, I suppose that'll be it for today. So I hope you guys are having a great Christmas. Good luck in the new year. I hope that things are going well for you. I'll catch you all next time.